Hello and welcome everybody to season 3 of the Draft Class podcast here on Knicks Film School. I'm so honored to be talking to y'all right now. I'm Kris and ready, excited, pumped, ecstatic to get talking about this 2024 draft class for the very first time with my KFS people. I can't wait. I love analyzing the NBA draft, but what makes it the most fun to me is the ping pong of it all. And I'm not talking lottery balls, folks. I'm talking about bouncing ideas back and forth, different perspectives. And that's why on every episode of Draft Class, we feature a different guest. This time around, we had to go to the gold mine, right? I mean, you take a look at NBA draft coverage. I'm someone who buys the No Ceilings NBA draft guide every single year. My Kobe Charlotte No Ceilings shirt is in the closet right now. I love this brand and I love the people who make up this brand. And that is why today I am honored to welcome Tyler Metcalf onto the show. He's with No Ceilings. He's also a contributor for Canis Hoopus if you follow the Timberwolves coverage at all. Tyler, welcome to Draft Class, man. It is so great to have you here.
I'm thrilled to be on with you. And if you like differing opinions, you're going to love this draft class because, oh my gosh, there are from 1 to 30 to and then on. You can find anyone who's falling in love with anyone on this board. And there are about a dozen different guys where as long as you make a cogent argument for them and at one, I'm like, okay. I can kind of see it if that's what you believe and those are the things you value. I get it. So it's going to be a fun class. It's going to be a really interesting and different class compared to the ones that we've gotten in the last couple of years.
Quickly about draft classes in general, I remember the 2020 draft class was supposed to be like the worst thing ever that had ever the graced our terrible planet and like all of that. And then you take a look at guys like Emmanuel Quickly, Desmond Bane, and Jaden McDaniels going 25-30. And it's just crazy how that pre-perception of a draft class can so strongly affect the whole cycle's coverage, right? The 2021 draft class was supposed to be the best thing since the wheel was invented. And you take a look, it's like, who goes number 1 in a redraft today? Is it Cade? Raptors fans would take Scotty Barnes in a second. You know, it's hilarious to me. And that's why I think it's kind of fun that we're starting right before March Madness here. And that's why the focus of this episode is going to be these NCAA tournament guys. But Tyler, I've got a question for you before we say goodbye to the international and G League Ignite, et cetera, portion of the prospect pool. This draft class has more non-American college players projected to go early, late in the first round, in the second, than most draft classes. What do you make of that? Do you think that that's the G League Ignite and leagues like it actually kind of showing up the NCAA, or is it just a funky year?
I think a lot of it is just kind of the funkiness with how college basketball has been this year. Obviously, there are a handful of guys like AJ Johnson who decommitted from Texas and went to the NBL Rising Stars. Ron Holland did a similar thing, decommitting from Texas. Tough recruiting class for them, and going to the Ignite instead. So I just think it's the kind of continued growth and diversity of opportunities for these young kids where just 5 years ago, there was basically one path for them to really pursue. Yes, there were some guys who went abroad, but the success rate on that was all over the place and real hit or miss. So I think it's just kind of all of these different organizations like the NBL developing their Rising Stars program this year that attracted guys like AJ Johnson and Trenton Flowers over there. And then just the proliferation of basketball throughout Europe and the rest of the world, where we do kind of keep seeing more guys, especially kind of coming from France, common theme here, really just hone their skills and really develop and kind of figure out how to best utilize their skills, how to fit into a team context, and then maximize their athleticism. So it is a down year for college basketball, but I think it's just the kind of a result of basketball continuing to grow worldwide.
There is a center on the Fordham Rams men's basketball team from Yaoundé, Cameroon, which is exactly the town that Joel Embiid is from. and he really looks up to Embiid. It's just awesome to watch the globalization of our beautiful sport. But with the draft class in general, I mean, I'll be blunt, right? Are we buying the narrative that this is a weak class, or do you think it's the fact that there are fewer top NCAA prospects that just makes our general media market go, eh?
So it's tough because it's almost impossible to not compare whatever class we're looking at now to the ones that just came before it. But I think we're kind of forgetting that we've been incredibly spoiled in these, last handful of years where we've gotten Wembanyama and Cade and Mobley and Scotty Barnes and Jalen Suggs, who's even finding his role in kind of as a different type of player than he was in college. And then Anthony Edwards, LaMelo Ball, even Luka Doncic. It's like we've had some guys who are looking like all-timers in recent years, and that's not the norm. So is there that guy in this class? Probably not. You never want to say never, because there were those similar kind of thoughts around the Anthony Edwards class and way overthinking that. And obviously COVID and lack of workouts and all that kind of stuff played into that as well. But I don't think there's that MVP franchise cornerstone building block type of guy who's going to change a franchise. But there's always talent in drafts, and it's just going to be, can you find it? Do they end up in the right spot where they're able to kind of thrive and develop their skills? And I think there are going to be a lot of guys who are really good number 2 or 3 options in their prime. So there isn't that superstar in this draft, at least obvious, staring us in the face like we've seen in recent years. But there is a lot of talent when we look at kind of role players and just regular starters.
Right on that note, to pivot, when you are going to be watching this NCAA tournament, are you saying to yourself, okay, well, we're watching Mikal Bridges on the Nets, Julius Randle on the 2021 Knicks, where these guys have more playmaking equity on this team than they should on any team that's going to be serious? Like, are you looking out for ancillary skills? Are you looking for someone to pop as a lead ball handler? Cough, cough, Rob Dillingham. Are you, what is it you're going to be looking for in this tournament?
Yeah, and from an evaluation standpoint, I view March Madness as just kind of like another piece to the puzzle. I really try not to overreact to big time performances. And when guys do get hot and go on a run, it's, I first just like to enjoy it and appreciate it for what it is, but then try and figure out, okay, is this just an outlier hot streak, or did he kind of start tapping into some different things that he just showed in pieces throughout the regular season? I think the biggest area that I look for is guys from more kind of mid-major schools and them playing against the high major teams. Like going back to Ja Morant, when he was with Murray State, he was incredible for Murray State and dominated everyone. And there wasn't really a whole lot of doubt about him coming into the tournament. But then when he just completely single-handedly demolished that Marquette team, it's like, oh, okay, yep, nope, this dude's for real. Here we go. So it's these kind of bit role players, some guys like Cody Williams, Johnny Furphy. How do they kind of match up when they're given a little more responsibility? The lights get a little brighter, and they're facing guys who are also kind of viewed as draft prospects. So it's just another kind of piece of the evaluation and just kind of seeing them in a different context. But I try not to overweight it or get way too influenced by performances in either direction.
I was just covering the Big East tournament for WFUV Sports last week and watching Devin Carter go up against Baylor Shireman. It was like people playing 2 different sports, man. Like I totally agree that they're obviously a head-to-head outperformance is what got the Knicks to draft Kevin Knox over either Bridges or, things like that. So you can't put too much stock, right? But yeah, it's got to be worth something. The tape's got to be worth something. And I think there's something to the head-to-head aspect of this all that makes you go, oh, okay, wait, that guy can hang with those kind of players. Okay. But since we got into specific names, I mean, I'm just going to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Which guys in this draft class stand out as like tournament darlings to be? Like, I have a couple names that come to mind. I'll go after you as to not, take your thunder, which I'm doing now as I continue to talk. So go ahead.
I mean, Stephen Castle is number 2 on my board. So he wouldn't, a big tournament from him wouldn't really change much for me. But I do think there are a lot of question marks, rightfully so, consensus wide, because he can't really shoot right now. The confidence and the willingness is slowly improving as the season is kind of rounded out here. But for the bulk of the season, he's just passing up wide open threes. And I would much rather have a guy take them and miss them than just not even look at the rim. But if you ignore the shooting, which admittedly is a major aspect of basketball, as we know, there really isn't anything else that he does that I'm worried about. He's a good athlete, really strong. His defense has been incredible this season, and I thought he was going to be a pretty bad defender coming into this year. He's moving off ball, he's rebounding, he's cutting. The playmaking's high level, and when you think about him coming into this year from high school, he was a point guard in high school where he was the dominant on-ball, heliocentric type of player. And the fact that he pivoted into being kind of a bit role player on a team looking to repeat as title contenders, all of those things, when you combine them into one package, it makes me really, really optimistic about the player, that the baseline that he could be, even if the shot never comes around. But then it makes me even more optimistic of, okay, this guy's mechanics aren't broken. He's going to figure it out in some context.
Right. Other than him, anyone else that comes to the top of the brain?
And the Kentucky guys.
Yeah, I was gonna say Dillingham and Shepherd both are screaming for that kind of run. I think it's not obvious that it'll happen, obviously, because anything can happen. It's March, but it just feels like it's almost destined for those two to be a power punch. I also think there's something about Dalton, man. There's some Tennessee, if they can get things together and not come out flat, because when they start slow, they don't come back. But if Dalton connects, can you imagine Clyde Frazier ripping a connects on the spin and win? Dude, there's something about that kid that screams tournament darling. I don't know. I feel it's palpable.
Yeah, my only skepticism with him being a big time riser is I don't know what else there's left for him to do, because he was dropping multiple 40-point games in SEC play. He's been absolutely incredible all season, but for people just tuning into college basketball who've, been told that this class sucks and no one in college basketball is worth a darn. Yeah, if he gets on a heater, people are going to fall head over heels with him. That Kentucky offense, it wouldn't be surprising if they had a couple 100-point games in this tournament. Shepherd, Dillingham, Antonio Reeves, even. Couple other names just off the top. Jared McCain, I think, could do a lot for his stock. Jacoby Walter desperately needs to get hot because he has been struggling. And then Colin Murray Boyles from South Carolina, I think, could be a guy that really plays himself into lottery top 10 consideration.
Wow. Okay. Awesome. What is there a swing factor for him for you that
shooting?
If he showed, okay.
I'm a little more skeptical on the shot. I really like him. People who do believe in the shot and think that he will get there, they comp him to Julius Randle a lot. I think his defense this year has been incredible. One of the best rebounders in the country. Really high motor, really high intelligence, awesome passer. I get some kind of Bam Adebayo vibes from him. I'm not saying he's going to be Bam, but that type of player, that archetype. So it's going to be shooting.
Taylor Hendricks with maybe a little more wiggle potential or however you feel. But I get the archetype you're talking about, that impact guy. All right. Now for what I think is the more fun second side to that same coin, which prospects that are not super hyped right now will put themselves on the map this March? I would say Reese Beekman jumps off the screen to me as someone who I could see Knick fans being hey, that guy kind of looks like Deuce, doesn't he? That guy kind of, how are you feeling?
Beekman's been a tough eval for me because his defense is outstanding. But then you go and just like look at the numbers, and obviously Virginia never puts up big numbers, but you look at his efficiencies and just his production this year, it's all off the charts. He just screams reliable backup point guard who can just do a little bit of everything, just make the right play really high level defense. Their game with Colorado State, I think, is going to be a really tough one. And a guy on Colorado State who I think could kind of fall in that same bucket is Nick Clifford. I think the matchup between him and Ryan Dunn, I really hope they kind of match up and go one-on-one. But yes, those are two of the better wing defenders in the country right now. And it'll be a really, really big time test for Nick to prove if the shot is real. Can he do a little bit off the bounce? So when we were talking at the top about what do we take away from this, this is going to be the best defense Nick Clifford faces, and how real and how much more is there to his offense than he's kind of shown.
I don't know that this guy necessarily screams Knicks, but especially with, if Kolek's going to be playing, I think Oso Ighodaro is someone who could probably get a couple people to be like, oh, I might lotto him. And I know that might be, so to some people outrageous, to some people not, but that's the beauty of this draft class is you take the guys you have ranked from 12 to 40, randomize the order, and someone out there has that big board. Like It's like a winning lottery ticket. It's like a lottery ticket that can't lose. Someone out there has that combination.
1,000%. I think Oso and Kolek could pretty easily cement themselves as first rounders with just a strong run. A couple Colorado guys, Tristan Da Silva, upperclassman, just does a bit of everything. There's one other name I had. Deron Holmes is probably up there too, where he's always had a really good career at Dayton, but he's really grown as a shooter. So if they can really take it to Nevada in that first game and then give Arizona, which will be a really tough matchup, especially for him and some of the bigs that they have. Those would be two just awesome showcase games for him.
Now, one other player I need to bring up, because The Athletic in their latest mock draft had the Knicks taking him at number 21, is Zack Edey. When it comes to the tournament, there are, no pun intended, very tall expectations for him and his team.
Yep.
Do you think it's at the point where he's improved enough as a player from last season where like people are like, oh, he's just tall, allegations are no longer going to stick? Or do you think Purdue has kind of put themselves in a situation where those expectations are so volatile?
I definitely think he's improved a lot. I wouldn't quite take him that high, but I have him at the very end of my first round right now. Bartorovic queries they're just fun. Obviously, there's some manipulation that can go into them, but pretty much whatever you run that doesn't include 3-point shooting, he's going to show up in them. He's just a production machine. He's so big. He has improved kind of his footwork out in space a lot. Obviously, you don't want him defending past the free throw line. He's exclusively a drop coverage guy, but I think as like a backup center for 15, 20-ish minutes a night, I think he's going to carve out a really solid career because he's an awesome rim runner, great hands, rarely fouls, or at least rarely gets called for him. Big Ten fans would have something to say about that. Really good shot blocker. So I do think that there's a legitimate role for him, even though he's 20, 30 years past what would be ideal for him in terms of the NBA play style.
Yeah, I hear you there. And then I also think there's something to kind of trying to project the direction the league is going to go in and always thinking like, hey, everyone's zigging, so someone's going to zag. There's my favorite tweet of the year and we're in an era where NBA teams are scoring 150 points a night. And then you go to Madison Square Garden and the Knicks beat you with metal bats for 2 hours. I think it's perfect because the Knicks have Josh Hart just like starting every game. Like, obviously it's not the dead ball era of the early 2000s where all 5 guys on the court are a late shot clock ISO option, right? That's not a thing anymore. Herb Jones exists. Josh Hart exists. Everything in between exists. But someone who I think kind of fits the modern mold of an ancillary player would be the other guy The Athletic had the Knicks taking, and that's Johnny Furphy with the 19th pick. You mentioned him earlier. Thoughts on the fit there with the Knicks and on him as a prospect?
I love Johnny Furphy. Their Big 12 game against Cincinnati was really rough for him. The shot has kind of fallen off a little bit from that 2-month stretch right at the turn of the year, where he was shooting like 45% on volume. I do think he's going to be a really good shooter, but he's a 6'9" elite athlete. I highly recommend going and looking up some of his pre-Kansas tape when he was playing in Australia. The dude can leap. He's a big time athlete, elite rebounder, especially for his position. I keep hearing everyone say that he sucks at defense. I don't think he's that bad. I think there's a lot of optimism for him defensively. I think he works hard on that end. I buy the defense eventually. So he's still pretty raw right now, and we're starting to see those inconsistencies in his game where he's, one of the first names on the scouting report, especially now that Kansas has so many injuries, and those inconsistencies are causing issues. But I think there's so much. It's really easy to forget that he's a freshman. And I just get so many when things are clicking for him. I get a lot of just Trey Murphy vibes from him.
And it's not the rhyme, right? It's the fact that they actually play similarly. I had the same comp. And I hate comps because I feel like I personally can't do them. It's like the way my mom talks about a margarita on Saturday. Like, oh, no, I can't. I just, it's not good for me. I can't and then you'll see her too deep 10 minutes later. It's like, for me with comparisons, it's like, no, I can't. I'm putting this guy in a box. Also, he plays like Jimmy Butler or RJ Barrett or anywhere in between. So it's kind of tough, but you hit on something important, which is he wants it on the defensive end. Listeners of Knicks Film School Study Hall know that I make Sean with the W's ears bleed with how often I say 51% of defense is effort. 51% of defense is effort. Oh, and 51% of defense, it's effort. It's wanting it. And so because I'm so hard hitting on that agenda, to me, I think I do have a personal bias toward guys that just get after it on that end. Because at the end of the day, you're in the NBA, you are at least some grade of athlete. You can figure it out. So I don't know. That's how I feel. And if a guy wants it, they'll make it work.
Yeah. And it may not make them an elite all NBA level defender, but they make it passable. They make it so they don't get played off the court. And I think minimum, like worst case scenario, I think Furphy gets to that level.
Absolutely. Well, I want to zoom out a little bit, go a little macro here, because with this tournament coming up, I'm sure guys, like we said, will kind of begin to separate themselves a little bit. And at some point, there will reach a point where there's a clear top 8 to 10 that people are kind of sure are all going to go in the lottery somewhere. When it comes to that group of guys, obviously the Knicks, currently projected to have 19 and 21 aren't there, but they have lots of future draft picks. They have intriguing pieces like Miles McBride. What do you think in this specific draft class for a team like the New York Knicks, who run such a short rotation, where Thibodeau has his guys and, he likes to stick with them? What presents itself, even if you haven't put much thought to it yet, just then off rip here, as the better option for a good team like New York that has draft capital? Is it taking 2 bites at the apple? Is it saying, hey, this class is so leveled out, you get 2 bites, you get 2 guys, you just need one to stick and you can walk away happy? Or do you move up and try to grab one of those golden apples, try to get in that upper echelon of prospect? Is there an option there that stands out to you as maybe better?
Yeah, and it obviously it always kind of changes once guys start falling, and OKC takes some wild swing at 6 that no one expected, who was mocked in like the 30s, and now the whole draft board has changed. So now maybe 19 and 21, I think you said, maybe those get you up to 12. So it all kind of depends. But I think the Knicks are kind of in a really fun spot right now where they can kind of take 2 bites of the apple, like you said, because regardless of who they take, they're not going to play. Tibbs doesn't play rookies. He barely plays second-year guys. He barely plays third-year guys. You guys all know this. I know this from his time in Minnesota. But if around 1920, if they could target a guy like Yves Missi and or Isaiah Collier, take some of these developmental guys, even a Kwame Evans, a Tijane Saloon over in France, I think there are some really fascinating developmental pieces that come year 2, 3, 4 after, as some of the starters maybe age out or get too expensive. Now they're kind of acclimated to expectations, to play style, to chemistry, and all of that kind of stuff. And they're really able to hit the ground running. So I think 19 and 21 could probably bump them up 5-ish spots.
I was going to say 14,
but
nailed it.
But I don't think that that's necessarily worth it unless they have their eyes set on a very specific guy who is kind of falling, a la Cam Whitmore last year.
Yeah. And, you bring up Yves Missi, and he's someone who I know is going to get talked about a whole lot on this show on season 3 of Draft Class. Go into that a little bit, because I just saw someone today had him in the top 5 on their board, and I've seen people not have him top 20. And again, that is the beauty of this draft class, is kind of like listen to nobody. Use Draft Class, this show, as a tool to bring yourself up to speed, but don't let me evaluate players for you. Don't let, the same way I tell Knicks fans, like, if you think someone should be playing, don't let the fact that they don't play make you think they're bad, right? Like, don't let Thibodeau evaluate players for you. You're allowed to have your own opinions. I think the same thing about this draft class. Like, don't let me evaluate players for you. Like, what do you think about Missi as a New York Knick in terms of what the Knicks do? Tough, nasty, physical, gritty, mud wrestling, anything in that range, you name it. What it's like that game where it's like I say a word and you say the phrase. What comes to mind when you think Missi on the Knicks?
Mitchell Robinson, honestly. It's kind of eerie how similar they play. I can't get to Missi top 5. I have him like right around 20, just because he is still super raw. But the athletic tools are incredible. The motor is really, really encouraging. It's just there isn't that consistency there from him. The just defensive awareness isn't as consistent as you would like. There are flashes and there are stretches of really high level stuff, really high level rim running, great hands, shot blocking, rebounding, everything that you want from that kind of athletic rim running type of center. It's just that consistency on the defensive end. When it's good, oh my God, is it good? But Baylor's defense has really struggled all year. And a lot of that has been some of the inconsistencies from their wing defenders and these funky zones that they've been running out there. And Missi just doesn't always look comfortable. But if you're trying to really get sold on him, I believe is their game against Duke at MSG, where he was just incredible. His parents were in the crowd and he showed out. He had an awesome game. So if you're looking for all right, why do I need to buy in on this guy? I think that would be the kind of number one game to target.
Absolutely. And then kind of like the same question I just asked, but now throwing it to the scope of this whole draft class, and maybe 2 guys pop out, maybe 18 pop out for you. But when you think about this draft class and the New York Knicks, regardless of where you think they'll get selected, regardless of anything, who are some names in this draft class and this upcoming NCAA tournament that you think Knick fans should have an eye on, that you think Knick fans should say, all right, I'm not going to, let this guy's tournament performance make or break my eval, but I've got an eye on him because I think there's a chance that this guy's a Knick or that this guy fits here. Who stands out to you with that tough, nasty, physical identity?
I would. I'll kind of go by position here a little bit. I'm looking at the bigs. I think Donovan Clingan fits that. I think Yves Missi fits that. One of the guards that I love is Jared McCain. He is charismatic as all heck, and he just gets it. He's been put into basically just a shooting guard role this year, but in high school, he was a much better playmaker. He's just the best shooter on Duke. So when you have multiple point guards like a Jeremy Roach, Tyrese Proctor, Caleb Foster. Those guys get the ball more since McCain's just this lethal shooter, but he has a lot of real high level craft finishing around the rim, really high level playmaker. I got to see him at Hoop Summit last spring. He was the best playmaker there in my eyes, and just really good rebounder too. So there are some kind of CJ McCollum, Jalen Brunson vibes of that physicality. He's like, yes, he's technically a small guard, but he plays like he's a lot bigger because he's really, really strong. I mean, Rob Dillingham in the Garden would be fun. They won't be able to get that high, but God, that would be fun. Otherwise, Ryan Dunn, just defensive chaos engine. Doesn't give you much of anything on offense, but that defense is some of the best you'll see in any of the recent classes.
Absolutely. I think someone else who stands out to me, I guess, in terms of just the defense is Tulane Scott. He had such great. I mean, for me, when you look at athleticism, making the right play, going out of your way to stop guys from doing what they feel like they're going to be able to do. I just think, or sorry, not Tulane, North Texas, wrong green team, but wow. But just in terms of like Nick identity, okay, like I see something. Tyler, my final question for you is going to be the silliest of the day, in the sense where no one will fault you when this is inevitably wrong, but someone's going to nail it, and that clip will go crazy. If you had to say right now someone that you can see the Leon Rose, Walt Perrin front office leaving this draft with, who's the player in the NCAA tournament that you could see wearing orange and blue this summer? Like they pick him and you just go, oh yeah, of course. For me, a couple years ago, it was Quentin Grimes. I was like, that guy is probably just going to be a Knick. It just feels like Thibodeau would be all over that. And it comes out later that Thibodeau was like the impetus behind drafting him. So there's something.
If they would have made the tournament, I think Devin Carter would have been a really strong answer.
Yes,
but yes. I'm going to go with a different Big East point guard and say Tyler Kolek.
Oh, that's fun. That's fun. Okay, cool. I love that. I think there's something to the Knicks preparing for that big star trade that makes guys like even a Deuce McBride on the roster feel like they might get dealt tomorrow. Trades aren't even legal right now, and these guys are probably stressing out, checking their phones. Like, am I going to get? Is Embiid? Is he going to move? So, yeah, I think Kolek would be really fun. You see, from covering the Big East tournament last week, how the other guys talk about him, like how Cam Jones talks about him, how Shaka even talks about him. It's just like a given that they think he's the best player in the Big East, like the whole conference.
Yeah.
And it's a level of faith from his teammates that makes you want to believe too, right? Like it makes you be like, no, of course they're right. Like that's their guy, but they're also right.
Yeah, and just he's one of the best sound clips too. If you go kind of just Google him or search him on YouTube and some of his press conference stuff, he's a dog. He just gets how to play, and he's just one of these guys where he's really crafty, high level shooter, and just makes everyone else around him better. He just really has that high level understanding of the flow of the game and kind of what the moment needs.
Yeah, it feels like someone who might not see any burn year one, like you were saying, and then come in year two as like the backup guard for Brunson. Of course, Brunson's contract is descending, so they'll have room for that first round pick money on the Bucks, even if they go get that star. But I just think that that's a great answer because of even off the court stuff, like I was saying earlier, but then on the court, I think he kind of speaks for himself. How about Marquette though, being so good, making it to the final without him? That was impressive. I can't lie. Cam Jones is someone who I think deserves a shot. I could see a team, not Atlanta because they got Bufkin, right? But some team like that has a great lead guard that can afford to go digging in the second round for a backup or maybe even the future of that position. Cam Jones needs a shot somewhere.
he's a really fun, just pure bucket getter. And when he gets hot, he's kind of one of those guys where it's like, when he gets hot, he can kind of take over a game and drop 20 points in 12 minutes. But if the shot's not falling, you can just pull him and not really disrupt the rotation at all. So it wouldn't surprise me if he's one of these guys that we see get on a team at Summer League, whether he's drafted or not, and then work his way into a two-way and then eventually a full contract. So I think he's going to be in the NBA one way or the other.
I'd love it. I know you have a Timberwolves game to cover tonight. So, sir, I'm going to let you go. But before you do so, anything you want our listeners to go check out or anything you want them to go follow you on, you name it.
And you can follow me on Twitter at TMetcalf11. You can follow all of our No Ceilings stuff at No Ceilings NBA across all socials, YouTube, NoCeilingsNBA.com. We have written stuff 5 days a week. That's all free. We also have additional stuff with paid tiers. We also just tweeted out we're doing a March Madness bracket, like mostly everyone else is. Winner gets free draft guide for this year. So if there's anyone that you're curious about listening to or reading up on, I would be shocked if we haven't covered them in some form or fashion. So just I'm a little biased, but I recommend going and checking out NoCeilingsNBA.com.
You guys are incredible. Like I said, I buy the draft guides. I have merch. I love to support because it's so obvious. Like every sentence you read from a No Ceilings report is like, oh, 8 hours of film went into that one. Like that one sentence. So I appreciate how succinct you guys are about so much information. I could go on forever about it, but luckily for you, I won't. Tyler, thank you so much for joining us today.
Appreciate it.
For my listeners, thank you so much for being here. Season 3 of Draft Class begins now. March Madness begins now. Welcome to March and welcome to Season 3 of Draft Class. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll see y'all soon.